It is a pleasure to gather with you for this Leadership Symposium on Brain Health and Dementia Care, an event that embodies what is possible when mission-driven organizations come together across sectors, cultures, and even continents. We are honored to again partner with the Chicago Scots and Caledonia Senior Living and Memory Care. Our Center for Gerontology last hosted a symposium with the Chicago Scots in 2016, and it is inspiring to see how that early collaboration has grown into today's gathering. Our shared commitment to improving the lives of people as they age is made possible by our shared supporter, the Russell and Josephine Cott Memorial Charitable Trust, which has long been the primary funder of the Gerontology Center here at Concordia. We are grateful for their continued vision in advancing work that makes a difference in the lives of older adults and families. Today, we have a remarkable group of attendees, more than 90 registered across in-person and online participation, including practitioners, researchers, advocates, students, and community leaders. This blend of perspectives is essential because dementia care is not simply a clinical issue. It touches public policy, family systems, cultural identity, and the fundamental question of how communities care for one another. And of course, it is a privilege to have with us in person Gus Noble, President and CEO of the Chicago Scots and Caledonia Senior Living and Memory Care. Gus has been a steadfast advocate for elevating global perspectives on aging and memory care, and his partnership has been essential in bringing this symposium to life.
We meet to explore a theme, brain health and dementia care, integrating innovations and best practices in Scotland and the USA. Today's will be a meeting of some very powerful minds with input from preeminent blue chip universities and organizations in Chicago and in Scotland. You may be aware that the organization I'm proud to represent, Chicago Scots, is the oldest 501c3 in Illinois. In 2023, we were honored to receive the largest philanthropic gift we've ever received, $14 million from the Nagoni Foundation. And this pioneering gift is foundational because it gives us the opportunity and indeed the responsibility to dream of innovatively transforming Caledonia to meet the future needs of seniors in Chicagoland. So we have an ambitious vision for this region, to work with experts to transform Caledonia into a world-class, world-leading center of excellence in memory care, a place where compassion meets with cutting-edge science, a combination of global expertise and a regional commitment to create something extraordinary. I'm so grateful that today's group of experts have agreed to join us in this journey so that American and Scottish engagement and collaboration is at the very heart of our transformation. Today we'll have 3 panel discussions on public policy, advocacy and the law, natural built and social environments, and on lifestyle, culture and care. Our first speaker is Dr. Jay Olshansky. Jay's work focuses on human and population longevity and aging. He addresses some big questions. Is the human body designed for long-term use? What if we prolong the very thing that most of us fear, old age? And is healthy and productive aging even possible? I know that you'll be fascinated when you hear about his incredible work.
So let me paint the picture for you of what we've done to ourselves in the modern era. This is the transformation that we've done in humans over the last century in terms of raising life expectancy. Life expectancy for humans historically has always been low. It was always below 30 years. And we quite remarkably, within the last century and a quarter, raised life expectancy dramatically up to, depending on where you are in the world, roughly about 80 years today. Now, here's where I want to get a message across that you probably will not be familiar with. But hopefully this will turn a light bulb on for you and you will look at human longevity differently than you have in the past. The tendency in the world of aging is to believe that there's some sort of limit to how long we can live and that that limit is ahead of us, and that we haven't gotten there yet. And I'm going to tell you that this particular perspective is fundamentally, foundationally, biologically incorrect. The natural limit to human longevity is decades behind us. We think, my colleagues and I believe, that the natural limit to human longevity, if you remove all medicine, all medical technology, all interventions of any kind, any surgical procedures, we think that the natural duration of life on average for humans would probably be somewhere in the 30 to 50 range, maybe on the higher end of that range. And I will suggest that everyone, almost everyone in this room, is living on what my colleagues and I refer to as manufactured time. It's sort of like stretching a rubber band. The more you stretch it, the more difficult it becomes to stretch it further. When it comes to human longevity, once you achieve a life expectancy, and I've argued this in an article I published in Science back in 1990, that once life expectancy for a population makes it to about 85, it's not really going to rise much higher, no matter what we do. Even if you cure major fatal diseases, one thing gets in the way: the biological process of aging, which influences all of the main organs in the body. Basically, what we've done during the course of the 20th century is we've dramatically reduced early age mortality. Infectious and parasitic diseases have declined dramatically. We got what we wanted. We saved the children. The problem is that we had to pay a price for those longer lives, and that price that we had to pay is the rise of the diseases and disorders associated with aging. So heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, other forms of dementia, hearing loss, vision loss, these are all consequences of living long enough to experience the biological process of aging. It's what we wanted. We wanted these long lives, but we had to pay a price. And the question is, where are we headed now? We are going to see a rising prevalence of frailty and disability among individuals that make it to older ages in the future. So you're in the right business here, because the prevalence of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia is going to rise dramatically as a consequence of success, not failure. So be careful what you wish for, because life extension without health extension, I would argue, is harmful. And I think that may hopefully set the stage for where you're headed the rest of the morning. And I'm going to stop there, and thank you for your attention.
Our first panel will focus on public policy, advocacy, and the law. And why are these concepts important to those of us working in caregiving, both professionally and personally? Although they are core parts of the support system that most of us don't see on a daily basis, we all need them to work. And our three panelists for this session live and breathe policy, advocacy, and the law. Delia Gervier, who is Regional Vice President and Executive Director of Alzheimer's Association of Illinois. Brandon Peck, who is a partner at Peck Ritchie LLC. And joining us remotely from Scotland, Jim Pearson is the Deputy Chief Executive of Alzheimer Scotland. Let's welcome them, ladies and gentlemen. I'm particularly interested to hear from Delia about Illinois Brain Health Project and from Jim about Brain Health Scotland. So Delia, please tell us about your work.
Our organization is the largest nonprofit funder of research in the world. We reach people through education and support groups. In the state of Illinois last year, through our educational programs, we reached over 47,000 people with awareness presentations around brain health, the signs and symptoms, healthy living, etc.
And Jim, could you tell us about the work of Alzheimer Scotland, please?
Thank you, Gus. We are the only national charity for dementia within Scotland. Our main aim is to ensure that no one goes through the experience of living with dementia alone. We are a campaigning organisation. We advocate for change. We influence policy and practice across Scotland. We work in collaboration. We established Brain Health Scotland, which is essentially about influence in public health, working with public health raising awareness, education, influencing public health policy, but also targeting populations about the potential risk of developing dementia, to come in to talk to our expert advisors, to have an assessment to determine what their risk factors may be, and using the 14 modifiable risk factors to develop advice and a personalised plan for them. And the final part of that is the brain health services, the brain health clinic, where people can collect clinical advice, and also perhaps an earlier disease detection, diagnosis, and the opportunity to participate in research and potentially clinical trials.
Brandon, could you tell us about the Illinois Supreme Court's Commission on Elder Law, please?
You know, we have a lot of people who come in and say, hey, I have just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, and I would like to amend my estate plan. And we say, okay, we'll meet with you. Let's see how this conversation goes. 99 out of 100, I'm going to say to them, I need a note from your primary care physician or the neurologist or anyone who you have seen recently, and the state requires an MD, to tell me that you have the capacity to make these documents. And this is to protect them, to protect our conversations, to make sure that they're privileged, and to make sure that we can try to stay out of court if possible. It's never too late to have someone's estate plan put in place. Advance directives are very important to everyone in this room to know who to talk to and whose guidance to follow.
Illinois was the first state to mandate insurance coverage for FDA-approved Alzheimer treatments and diagnostic testing. Can you tell me why that's important? And then can you also talk about the 2023-2026 Illinois Alzheimer State Plan?
Illinois is typically a trendsetter, which I'm really excited to say. 2 years ago, we passed a bill that mandated training, dementia training for all healthcare professionals that came in contact with a person with Alzheimer's disease. So it's really critical now that we have FDA-approved drugs that insurance companies are covering the cost, and to have this bill passed now in the state of Illinois now means that we have a template set that other states can replicate. And then the state plan was enacted several years ago, and it was designed to establish a roadmap for a dementia-capable state of Illinois. And it brings together partners from across the state that provide recommendations on how we can become and continue to be more dementia capable. We provide recommendations every 3 years when we update the state plan on continuing to build the best practices possible in the state for dementia capable. We are promoting the modifiable risk factors that Jim mentioned earlier, and promoting brain health. YourBrainWillThankYou.com. It provides resources on how you can implement a non-pharmaceutical approach to reducing cognitive decline. It is a free online tool where you can go in and design your own personal plan on how to implement brain-healthy habits.
Jim, I'll come to you now if I could. Scotland was the country that gave the world's first national guarantee of post-diagnostic support. Could you talk about that? But could you also talk about the 10-year dementia plan that Scotland has in place?
The National Post-Diagnosis Support Guarantee came about as a consequence of Scotland's first national dementia strategy. And this was informed by consultation across Scotland with people with dementia, their families and carers, who were saying two things we really need to see better here: support after a diagnosis, and also improved experience in acute hospital and other hospital settings. And that project was called Facing Dementia Together. Nearly 13 years ago now, Scotland has had a commitment that everybody who has a diagnosis of dementia is offered a minimum period of 1 year's post-diagnostic support from a named and skilled post-diagnostic support link worker. And that is, without a doubt, been a significant game changer within Scotland. It's called Everybody's Story, and I think the Scottish Government deserve to be applauded for that commitment to ensuring that people with dementia are right down the centre of the development and implementation of the strategy. It has a broad vision to challenge the continuing stigma that's still associated with dementia.
Brandon, as you look around the world and the country, what represents innovation in elder law?
People are planning more. I think that is a huge thing. I think that medical providers, particularly primary care physicians, neurologists, are letting people know that they need to put plans in place. And then I think another big innovation that we're seeing that trips into elder law directly is banks these days are much more willing to raise a red flag and stop financial exploitation or freeze someone's accounts if they believe that there is cognitive impairment going on.
In the next panel, we'll look at the impact that environment can have on the lives of seniors. Can you talk about the outdoor dementia resource centres in the Highlands and in Edinburgh?
We, a couple of years ago, established the first dementia outdoor resource centre, which is in a place called Badagouish. It's a brain health and dementia resource centre. It utilises outdoor spaces and outdoor resources and promotes the ideas of green health. And we all know the benefits of spending time in green spaces.
I've got a quick fire for all of the panelists today. If I was to place a magic wand in your hand, what change would you make in the world that you can describe in 30 seconds?
What really came to mind right away was financial relief for caregivers. We find that caregivers are burdened financially, and whether it be through some type of subsidy or tax credits, if there is a way that we could relieve our caregivers who are shouldering this burden and the cost of caring for their loved ones.
Real key standards for the guarantees of what people with dementia can expect, from diagnosis right through to end-of-life care, to protect services that are often vulnerable when spending is tight. So definitely financial investment, equality of access to high quality supports for people with dementia. And the reality is we don't always have that.
I think the saddest thing that we see that I'd like to see a fix is individuals call with dementia or a form of Alzheimer's and they don't know how to pay for the care, as Delia and Jim said. They have read online they're going to lose their house if they have to go to a nursing home, that they're going to lose all their savings. So the magic wand would be to figure out a path, like Scotland sounds like has done a great job, where we can ensure that the care is going to be covered and people aren't going to lose all their assets paying for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our panelists. Let's consider how the world around us can shape health and longevity. What impact does connection to environment, especially the built, natural, social and cultural environment, have on the lives of seniors? Our experts are Raj Shah, who is a professor in the Department of Family and Preventative Medicine, Alzheimer's Disease Centre at Rush Medical College, David Victorson, who's a professor in Medical Social Sciences and a director of the Flourishing in Society and Health Research Lab at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, and Leslie Palmer, who is Professor of Aging and Dementia Design at the University of Stirling in Scotland, which is, of course, and I say this without a word of bias as an alum, by far the world's best university. Leslie, could you tell us about how you came to focus on memory care and architecture?
My practice over the past 20 years has always had a focus on centering the voices of people who are marginalised by design or excluded from the design process into the design process. And that manifests within the architectural practice with a focus on economically low-income communities within Scotland. And then within my research role, I work within a kind of novel and interdisciplinary field called neuroarchitecture. And that's an area that specialises in looking at how the built environment is perceived and experienced by individuals, but also how the built environment affects our ability to feel, to have emotional responses, and to orientate particularly. We were formed in 1989, and our founder, Professor Mary Marshall, was the first person to publicise dementia design friendly principles in the 1990s. And so the field that I work within, dementia design, is now internationally recognised as a non-pharmacological approach to ameliorate the symptoms of design, and it crosses built environment, products, and the natural environment as well.
Raj, could you tell us about your work, please?
My day job is mainly to try to think through how we can evaluate and design interventions to help people in various stages, from prevention to early diagnosis to treatment of common conditions in aging, especially Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and then to train another generation of individuals from various professions to be involved in the care of people with living with dementia, supporting their caregivers, and people at risk. You figure it out for dementia, you figure it out for autism, you figure it out for every other condition. You just got to start somewhere. And it's really been encouraging to see how people have been helping. And I hope that people, wherever community you live, whatever little influence you have, try to see, if you go to our website, ilbrainhealth.org, look up the dementia-friendly community, see if your community's there. With very little effort, but a lot of them doing small things in the right way and kind of pushing it forward, that we get better over time.
And David, welcome. Could you tell us about your focus on health and nature?
I'm a psychologist by training, and a lot of the research work that I do is at the intersection between physical, mental, and cognitive health. An extension of that work has, over the last decade, been on the environment around us and what can happen with our health and with our communities when we spend more quality, safe, meaningful time in nature, green space. It can hold us and allow us, again, to just let go of so many of the distractions and the cognitive load that we carry. And the theories about why we understand nature to be effective. I mean, sure, there's air pollution and noise pollution, and there are actual particles in the air, but there's also the fact that restorative environments can help us completely shift our attention to a soft fascination and to, again, to allow us to access other areas of the brain that calm our nervous system and keep us, again, from ruminating and, not being present.
Could you talk to us about what social environment and culture in particular, how does that impact and matter to care?
As much as we need to know the culture to make a diagnosis, understanding culture, understanding community, understanding the broader dynamics even across from family helps us to develop a better treatment plan to support people as they go through these experiences. The movement for Dementia-Friendly USA, where they took a public health approach to trying to reduce the stigma people feel as people living with dementia and their families and becoming isolated from their communities. So the entire idea was to develop sort of a multi-sectoral approach in a community, usually a town, a vicinity, community defined by place, where the work would be to get together not only the medical providers, but the social service providers, the frontline responders, the police officers, the firefighters that would have to sometimes address calls that would come in, businesses that were local in that environment, librarians, all the people that make up our community, to think about the person with dementia as the center point that live in their community, and to work together to think about how we can reduce stigma and isolation.
Thank you, Raj. Turn to Leslie now. Could you talk about how intentionally designed spaces can impact and affect our understanding of well-being and caregiving?
For me, intentional design is evidence-based design. I'll give you some examples of what evidence-based design would be. Within the context of dementia design, if we have a client who has Alzheimer's type dementia, it will typically present in the early stages with wayfinding difficulties. If we're working with a client who has Lewy bodies dementia, they're more likely to experience hallucination. And so reflective surfaces become problematic. That could be a mirror during the day, or that could be a glass window in the evening. So that reflection can create some agitation, some hallucinations. So it will vary depending on the subtype of dementia. And that's where evidence is important. And dementia-friendly design principles are an overarching series of principles around support care for the carers, around individuals, their identity, their agency.
I want to now come to you, David, and stay on the theme of intentionality. How important is it to be intentional and to prioritize our engagement with nature?
Intentionality is a health behavior. It is no different than getting enough sleep, walking enough steps, drinking enough water. When you're purposefully spending time, whether it's in your backyard in a hammock or walking through a forest preserve, and you're turning off the podcast, you might ask the person you're walking with if we could just walk for a minute and listen to birdsong, or just notice all of the things around us. That engages different parts of our brain that help us reset our fight, flight, or freeze response. So that in and of itself reduces cognitive load. And then it opens up other areas of our attentional frame to allow us to experience pleasant emotions and even awe from the simplest of things. Our brains are wired to daydream. Let's keep daydreaming, but let's give ourselves a few chances a day to tune in with intentionality to our surrounding environments, because that is big medicine that we're just letting go by. And I'd love to hear Leslie's ideas on this. If we can think about how we can bring the holding environment of nature into architectural design.
And one of the key principles is direct access from the principal living areas, unobtrusive, to get into the outside space. And accessible access to outside space is not a level threshold, it's the actual ability at any point to leave the building. The ability to break out of the building at really tense moments can drop people's aggression, agitation, really drop the situation. And it's very challenging to do that when you have, quite rightly, concerns about the risk of the individual. And if you have staff that are concerned about people going outside, they won't go outside. And if you have staff concerned about their residents, the residents will pick up on that. So drop all of the users' anxiety. Courtyards work beautifully for that.
Let's talk about how the social, natural, and designed environments come together. Leslie, you've said that design is transferable, but care as part of culture is not. Could you talk more about that, please?
A lot of the evidence base which underpins dementia-friendly design was developed in Occidental cultures. And so there's a big question around, can you export it and deploy it internationally in other cultures? Globalization has created homogeneity in design, which could be seen as success. Starbucks here looks like Starbucks in Tokyo, looks like Starbucks in Aberdeen. So that's an example of that kind of globalized design homogeneity. But design needs to be rooted in site-specific context. It needs to respond to vernacular, and it needs to respond to the users. And so what I have found is that you can export elements of design. I don't think care is as easily exportable. I think there really has to be a much more culturally nuanced understanding of the environments that you're working in. And very conscious within the UK context, it just looks like colonialism. Again, we're back in deploying our understanding in a very arrogant way of how other people should live and be cared for.
In 30 seconds, you have a chance to change the world. Raj, I'll come to you first.
The one thing I was hoping is that the challenge of the behavioral changes with dementia as it progresses are so huge, and we're not making as much progress as I had hoped, and it's not going to be a medication. Part of it's going to be Medicaid, but it's not going to be the full picture. The suffering it causes is something, if we can keep working on, to think about these other approaches that tie in our environmental exposures with our outside environments, inside environments, and community together to help us to figure out better ways to handle the behavioral changes that go on with the condition, and to reduce some of that suffering and that back and forth that has to go on with people having to go to the emergency room, not having hospitalization spaces, not having enough geriatric psychiatrists, and then getting stuck in a system that can't solve their problems. So that's going to be a challenge, but I wish we can clear that challenge and make it a little bit easier for people that have dementia and their families living with it in their communities.
Thank you, Raj. David, the wand is yours.
If I could make a change that's real, it would be, there's a really good leadership book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And the whole purpose of the book is about not resting on one's laurels and reimagining and reinventing ourselves, not changing our mission entirely, but knowing that we need to continually be reinventing. And I think about the growing urbanization across the globe and the decreasing green space across the globe, and how just here in Chicago, we're a great example of how certain communities of color have been redlined from nature, historically. And I feel like we're at the precipice of a really great opportunity to reinvent how we are designing cities and implementing them. And if I had the magic wand, it would be to not just see Chicago as a great, beautiful city, but to also think about ways that we can continue to bring green spaces in and out, especially for those communities who are unfortunately most affected by their separation from it.
Thank you, David. Leslie?
I wish that each of us could experience what it's like to have dementia for one afternoon. To experience that stress, to experience sometimes the indignity, the visual processing challenges and the hearing challenges. And I say that because, as I mentioned earlier, as designers and commissioners of designers, we're self-referential. And there's a lot of paternalism as well that comes through in some of our approach to design for dementia. And what we know is that if people can experience firsthand the challenges of the people they're designing for or commissioning buildings for, the design outcome improves. And that couldn't be more beautifully shown than with Ford, car manufacturer. I don't know if you know, but they introduced the third age suit when they were designing their suits, which is it's deployed to give their designers the experience of what it's like to drive with age-related impairment. And the outcome of that are cars that have been specifically designed to support people to drive for longer in their life. And for me, that goes beyond design. That's about maintaining someone's independence. It's about maintaining their identity and their joy of driving. And without that designed in empathy, the final outcome would not be as fit for purpose and as considerate. So it's really empathy through experiencing firsthand what our clients might experience.
Thank you, Leslie. Join with me, if you would now, though, to thank Leslie and Raj.
You're exercising your brain. The more things that you do, it causes your brain to work more to remember and hold the memories in your head.
Well, I always thought it was the most sensitive part of the body. And I didn't like to think about something if anything happened to it.
I thought that it sometimes plays tricks with what it's giving me to think about. Nice. But I don't want to think about what it says think about.
Brain is a white clumps of that size, maybe, white stuff. I learned it in art school. I had to learn human body. Yeah. And they showed the brain. And then when someone said brain, I said, this thing about brain. Yeah.
We say to the brain.
We say to the brain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For making me smart.
For making me smart.
From the brain.
From the brain.
We get wisdom.
We get wisdom.
We learn something new every day.
We learn something new every day.
We say to the brain.
We say to the brain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The poem that we heard kind of demonstrates how important poetry, music, and art and all of the aspects of culture and identity are all important components of health and care. Our experts in this panel are joining us online, Dr. Paul Cox from Brain Chemistry Labs, Tessa Garcia McEwen, licensed social worker at the Memory Center at the University of Chicago Medicine, And from right here at Concordia, Lisa Peters-Boomer, who is Director of Operations at the Centre of Gerontology and Executive Director of the COT Gerontology Scholars Programme. Lisa, could you give us an overview of your work at the Centre for Gerontology and the COT Gerontology Scholars Programme?
The Center for Gerontology has 4 focus areas. One is really focusing on bridging academics and our applied work at the center, and really pulling together our interdisciplinary work. We're also moving forward with age-friendly university and age-inclusive higher education projects right now as well. We also do service-based practice and policy shaping work, including work with congregations around spirituality and aging and helping them engage their older congregants in a more meaningful way. And lots of intergenerational work with the community. We're very external facing, and we provide programming to really bring people together and have meaningful discussions, and then doing some evaluation and applied research and translation at national conferences and so on.
Paul, can I come to you now, and could you tell us a little bit about Brain Chemistry Labs?
Sure, I'm an ethnobotanist. Brain Chemistry Labs is a not-for-profit organization in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. We began by going to the villages that have the highest rate of Alzheimer's in the world, which was in Guam. 2 villages where at its peak 25% of the adults were dying of these diseases. We discovered that their food was tainted with a bacterial neurotoxin called BMAA. We replicated that symptoms in animal models, in vitro models, and now we're engaged in a FDA-approved phase 2 trial at Houston Methodist. I wanted to find places that were very different from this but had similar environment. We started working in Okinawa on the very northern tip in a little village called Ogimi. Ogimi is known as Longevity Village throughout Japan. It's a matriarchal society, and there's nobody that's been raised in that village that is known to have Alzheimer's. People routinely live well over 100 years. I've come up with a few sort of learnings that I've received from these remarkable men and women on the village. One thing that's come up is get better sleep at night. It's completely dark in Ogimi. Has also come up at our clinical trial at Houston Methodist is that people that get good sleep, don't have sleep apnea, have a much lower rate of mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor to Alzheimer's. The Ogimi women get up every day and exercise. They dance, they sing. It's remarkable. And there's many studies showing that even something short as a 30-minute walk each day reduces risk of Alzheimer's disease. All the people there have their own little gardens. They tend plants. Of course, gardening is the biggest vocation in the UK, including in Scotland, Gus, and there just might be something to that. They're very socially engaged. Also, statistically, it's shown that learning a new language or even attempting to learn a new language reduces risk of Alzheimer's disease. Building a cognitive reserve to sort of always be learning seems to also to be a real reduction in terms of Alzheimer's. Oliver Sacks, who was my mentor in sort of remedial neurology, felt very strongly from his clinical experience that listening to music reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And then one of the most established factors in reducing Alzheimer's risk is to adopt a Mediterranean diet. There's no too late of a stage to try this. I mean, building a cognitive reserve, learning a new language, these are things, listening to great music that anyone can begin in their 80s or even their 90s. And I'm going to add Gus's reciting poetry there too. I want to throw that in, and maybe we can even come up with a clinical trial. Who knows? Robert Byrne is a therapeutic for dementia.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Tessa, could you tell us about the important work that you do? And I'd also like you to talk about how you support families as they navigate through the tough dynamics that can challenge them as they begin to live with memory loss.
Walking alongside the patients and the families every day, here's what I'm learning. The patient often feels unseen, misinterpreted, embarrassed, and especially lonely, whether they are at home or in residential care. I once asked a man who was a leader in his community, what would you like to have more of these days? And through his tears, he just put his hand up to his head like a phone. And he said, I just want to call. I just want to visit someone to do that with me. But I want them to do it not because I have dementia, but because they want to be with me. And that's key, with me. And that's the heart and soul of it all, helping the family, the caregivers, the staff, and everyone to feel moved to connect with the person inside who had a former life, had dreams and goals, a previous profession, likes and dislikes, and has trauma histories, because behavior is communication. So we want to teach the families how to notice their unique style of stress. So I gather the whole family in the room or a Zoom, and I say, hey, this is a serious brain condition. If it were cancer, everyone would hop to it, without hesitation. But this, too, is an all-hands-on-deck diagnosis. And finally, what's also incredibly impactful is helping the staff and the family members understand that the memory glitches are unpredictable and completely beyond their control. It's happening to them. Therefore, you can imagine how much it feels to be so unsettling and terrifying. And it means that, they genuinely can't communicate. So when they say, hey, I'm scared, or when they say, no, that means I can't, or I don't know how. And because, by and large, in most dementias, they remember how you make them feel.
Thank you, Tessa. That leads on to something that Lisa, I heard you say several times in our conversations, that we must honor individual personhood. Could you talk to us about what you meant by that?
It's about honoring an individual by creating meaningful, purposeful opportunities for them to engage, right? To look at a person and see what they can do and what they can offer. It's also about dignity of risk, right? How can people, how do you honor someone's personhood by allowing them to make decisions, even if it might be a little risky? It's also about reciprocity, whether they're in your home, whether they're in the community, whether it's adult day services or residential. Where are some opportunities for people to have reciprocity and to really think about purposefulness, right? Not just keeping people busy, not just engaging them in something that's always observational, but really how can they continue to engage in the life of their home, of their program, of their community. Tessa, some of the things you said were so important, and how do you provide that meaningful interaction in a way that's sustainable? And people's tastes change, their preferences change, and they're also able to learn new things. Even if we don't think so, they are.
Paul, you mentioned on our call many of the things that Tessa and Lisa have just covered. You mentioned observing these in Okinawa and other cultures. How important are these things like religion and identity and social interaction? How impactful have you seen them be on the brain?
Well, certainly in the case of Ogimi Village, they're incredibly social. And it's just woven into their daily activity. The other point, coming off what Lisa was saying, is that in many of the indigenous cultures I work in as an ethnobotanist, age is seen as a benefit. They're the librarians. So I think there's a certain prestige and dignity that's accorded to people who are older. And in my own practice, this translates into interrogating people's long-term memories, particularly if their dementia form is Alzheimer's disease, because they may not can remember my name, but they certainly can remember their tennis coach at McGill University, where they lived. And singing is another issue, is when they can sing Cole Porter, they know all the words to all the songs. So
now let's look into the future. Tessa, I'll start with you first.
Oftentimes, we are super reactive when we are handling tough moments in dementia. And one of the most powerful things I've learned from one of our support spaces for a care partner, the spouse goes, I think I figured it out. She goes, I'm learning to respond not with why, with exclamation points, because your body language, your tone, everything is alarming. But I'm learning to respond with, why, with a question mark. Because then you have a moment to really respond with calm and dignity. The gap in training that I see is that I notice a trend that happens all too often where patients are booted from memory care for a behavior and sent to Jerry Psych, and then they're no longer welcome back, and the family cannot take them home. Where do they go? One example was a language barrier, Jehovah's Witness, who reacted because a nurse came in with a needle, and he couldn't communicate in English and tried to defend himself. So we need staff training to combat the prevalence of patients getting misinterpreted or labeled and permanently documented as combative and aggressive during a genuine moment of maybe a fear or a cry for help, and they get blacklisted for placement in the future, and it's devastating to the family. I imagine not only this type of excellent staff training on person-centered care, like Lisa says, but it would also be equipped with grief counselors on site that can support both the sense of the multiple types of losses that occur in the dementia journey while they're still here for each of the family members and the patient and the staff, because they experience loss constantly when the residents pass away.
What I hope for the future is a more individualistic positioning for each patient of what the form of their symptomology is, and then having good folks like my other fellow panelists here guiding the rest of us on how to best language and how best interact with those patients.
Thank you, Paul.
One of the things that has come up a lot lately in the age-friendly world is the age-friendly ecosystem, right? Not just a dementia-friendly ecosystem, not just a dementia-capable ecosystem, but how about a paradigm where it's sort of dementia-competent, dementia-inclusive? You know, when you don't have to have a special viewing of a movie just to include people with dementia, and that people understand that words matter, that language matters, that the way we talk about and to people influences the way that they are perceived and viewed. It's person-centric, not system-centric, right? Yeah. And I think that's what we've been hearing throughout the day is how can we move to this paradigm where, sort of the grassroots solutions that work in neighborhoods and the sort of academic evidence-based programs, and we've seen some of them scale up in evidence-based caregiver supports and that kind of thing. Like, how can we bridge these?
I've been playing a fairy godfather all morning and giving everyone a magic wand to make a change that they can describe in 30 seconds happen in the world. So I'll come to you first if I could, Paul. The magic wand is yours to make that change.
For Western societies, it would be getting more accurate and rapid diagnosis. Again, microRNA markers seem to be functioning asymptomatically before there's, when the prodromal period is starting. So if we could actually have a way of diagnosing who's at risk and who's already on the disease path before symptoms appear, we could begin treatment and prepare to help them in a better way.
Wow, we all have the same magic wand answers because it's such a problem, right? My first one was awareness as well, like having the symptoms properly identified and acknowledged as seriously as cancer or considered for diagnostic workup and proper treatment. So many families come to me saying, Tessa, you're the first person to believe me. After years of going through it, they think it's psychiatric or mental health or a marital issue. They're sending them to a couples therapist or asking them to go to a divorce lawyer. And there's serious safety concerns, often involving children, that are often dismissed. In my past life, I worked in marketing communications, and I can't unsee that we just need a huge campaign. We need beautiful snippets and short commercials on TV like everyone else does for cancer and heart disease and stroke, and everyone else is represented. So if we can show that and maybe get one into the Super Bowl too, like, you know, I think we can break stigma when we use media and social media.
I really think it's the bridging of compassion and strategy with the clinical and academic work and really kindness.
On the behalf of everyone in the room, I thank our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for spending your morning with us today. Each of us in the room deals with challenges related to brain health in different ways. Caregivers, academics, politicians, family, friends, we're all impacted by dementia. And on a day like this, it's so apparent that we're all connected by a shared interest in making the lives of those who live with dementia better. Today, we explored this interest all the way from big picture, society at large, environments, through individual caregiving. And I think we can all agree that there are challenges at every level. And so I call for us all to come together to deal with the global rise of dementia. I spoke earlier about the major investment that Chicago Scots will make in Caledonia. We're determined that our investment will have resonance and impact beyond our campus through partners in the field, in the US and in Scotland. And I'm hopeful that today marks a significant beginning of a Scottish-US dialogue, an exchange of ideas, innovations and best practices that we will all own and be part of together. Scotland is a world leader in brain health and memory care. And we in the Midwest and we in Scotland have much to gain from a strategic partnership across the pond. To strengthen this connection, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Henry McLeish. Henry is the former First Minister of Scotland and Ambassador of Alzheimer Scotland. Motivated by his father's experience with dementia, Henry worked hard to bring dementia support to the national level in Scotland. Following his tenure as First Minister from 2000 to 2001, Henry has chaired the Alzheimer Scotland Fair Dementia Care Commission, working to ensure fair access to dementia services and to integrate dementia care more fully into health and social policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me and welcome the Right Honourable Henry McLeish.
So what I wanted to try to illustrate, first of all, was I've heard so many people talk, and I'm convinced now that dementia, neurodegenerative diseases in themselves are not given sufficient political priority in the West. And it might surprise you to know that in the United Kingdom, we have a National Health Service which is free at the point of need, but it doesn't include dementia. And then I remember COVID-19. How quickly did we get a vaccine? With miraculous speed. And why was that? Globally, we came together. Big pharma and smaller pharma got together. And politicians realized the importance of getting that. And hey presto, we got a vaccine. So to try and capture this idea, I heard a really bad advert or advertising for trying to raise money for dementia in the United Kingdom. And the advert said this: with dementia, you don't just die once, you die again and again and again. How outrageously awful. And then I thought, though, what is the other side of this? And a book published in 2009, don't agree with everything in the book, but the front cover says, the opposite to that view is, I'm still here. I'm still here. With all the qualities that I may still have. Because we don't know entirely what, in terms of the brain, is blacked out or diminished by Alzheimer's. But it made me quite proud to be on this planet to think that every soul deserves a hearing and that I'm still here is a message to all of us and to me to say, people matter. But when we talked about brain health in Scotland, you know, for the ordinary citizen, it was a major breakthrough because they had been brought up on a diet of thinking that the brain wasn't part of the body. People didn't talk about brain health because A, it was taboo, but most people out there in the real world thought, hey, I never thought about that. The brain is the same as my liver, my stomach, my replacement knee joint from my days in soccer. And all of a sudden, it starts to provide a context for looking at dementia, but in a much more positive way. So with that, Scotland is pioneering ahead with what you've heard in terms of brain health clinics. And if you look at dementia from the point of view that, first, there will be a cure, I have no doubt. Secondly, we're looking at care, and a lot of care can be enormously enhanced by more investment. But the other issue for me, which seems to suggest that we need more work, is the common point has been made by many speakers today of just treating people like human beings. When you're told you have dementia, or there's a diagnosis as positive, it shouldn't be a sentence. It should be a passport towards care and humanity. And we've developed a system, both in America and in the United Kingdom, where dementia happening to an individual becomes an enormous family pressure. But part of our brain health strategy in Scotland is to rethink completely, and using the idea of people leaving their home as an ultimate last resort. And often they will go into nursing care, which is hospitalised, instead of a care home. Now, it's not to say that care homes are not needed, of course they are, but it's actually presenting choice to people that are involved so that they're not going to be bankrupt, they're not going to be this. And what we're trying to do in Scotland is to develop, as part of this brain health strategy, we're discussing with actuaries in the financial sector, in the private sector, how we could start to insure against getting a diagnosis. Because for a lot of people, the diagnosis is bad enough, but their whole world just crumbles. Hey, that can't be right, can it? Scotland is a turning point because we were heavily involved in the Industrial Revolution, fighting wars, Scottish engineers, Scottish coal miners. They made enormous contributions to their industrial wealth in the UK and in Scotland. We had the period of the Enlightenment, 1740 and 1810, where anything that was being invented in the world came from Scotland. You know, we have had a remarkable history in so many different ways. So we're saying to ourselves in brain health, hey, this is the next enlightenment for us. The logic is so obvious. The resourcing can be difficult. But what it does need is political will. So in that sense, I just wanted to read you one paragraph from a little paper we're doing on brain health. And this thing I wrote, this is our new enlightenment and mirrors the sentiments of the book, Scotland 2070, a healthy, wealthy and wise Scotland, where the benefits of this small nation, thinking about the long term and using its assets to the full, will unlock remarkable benefits. We are a landscape of possibilities, and with the right approach, Scotland will be successful. And we will want to declare that Scotland will play the most important role in securing, in terms of dealing with Alzheimer's, we will be in the forefront of the cure. Secondly, in terms of brain health, we will lead the world in terms of the clinic setup we have, in terms of the remarkable insights that can provide for people. And then thirdly, the hope is that with some extra political support, we will lead the world in terms of the kind of subjects we've talked about. So when you add all these ingredients, we're happy to work with our colleagues everywhere. We want to create interdependencies. We want to work with anybody that wants to work with us to make sure that the people that you've discussed and talked about this morning get the rich deserves that they should be getting. That's a great ambition, Gus, to have for such a small country. I'm passionate about the idea that we could do better, and as far as Scotland's concerned, working with the world, we will do a lot better.